So I had a quick question about doing arc elasticities, at least, well, I don't know if there was an actual question, but I decided to talk about figuring out arc elasticities. And if you looked through the chapter 6, practice problems, you may have noticed that there are 2 questions, but when you downloaded the answer key, there are 3 sheets. And it isn't until sheet 2 that I start talking about Terry's haircuts. And you might wonder what the sheet 1 is about. Well, I presume, as I'm looking at it, I don't remember how I created this, but it sounds like something where I wanted to show people an example of doing these arc elasticity formulas. And again, the arc elasticities are described a little bit in slide 6, this arc elasticity formula. So if you have, this is useful if you have a table of data where you're not able to pick out, you don't have an equation where you can pick out a single price quantity combination. All you have is just a table of data, so you're like jumping from one row of the table to another row. You're not able to figure out exactly what value might be in between those 2 rows. So we had something similar on your question number 1, because you have these tuition and headcount stuff just for individual years, and you're not able to figure out things in the middle, in between the years, even though that might not make a whole lot of sense. But anyway, for this practice problem, I gave a couple just random price quantity combinations here in this first section. And what I tried to do is sort of break it down a little bit how you could calculate these things slowly, or a step-by-step process. So as I go back to the slide, slide 4 reminds me that elasticity is the percent change of Q divided by the percent change in price. When I go into my sheet again, my practice problem, then I have these 2 different prices, these 2 different quantities. So I want to figure out the percent change in Q and divide it by the percent change of price. And the shorthand way of figuring out percent change for these arc elasticities is to do the change over the average. So I've got this, there was a change in the quantity that happened, and then I can figure out the average between those 2 quantities. So if I look in my cell B4 here, it's got the change in quantity. So I'm doing this 115,000 minus the 12,000. And I'm dividing it by the average of those 2 values. And I get some result there. It's taking, because of the lag time, it's taking me a while for my screen to show it. But I'll just go on. On the percent change of price formula, I'm doing the $66 minus the $233. And you have to be consistent with the order that you're doing these things. So the $66 is associated with 115,000. So I don't want to do, what I did with the quantity was to do the 115,000 minus the 12. When I do the percent change of P, I have to go in that same order. So I have to do 66 minus 233. I can't do 233 minus 66 because I'm kind of flipping things around. So $66 minus $233 divided by the average of those 2. So that will give me my percent change of price. And so the elasticity is just the percent change of Q divided by the percent change in price. So what I did here in cell B6 is just to divide those 2 things. So the 160% divided by the negative 112%. So you can do it like that and, have Excel figure out the percent change of Q in one cell, and then have it figure out the percent change of P in another cell, and then divide those 2 things in a third cell. But you can also just kind of do everything all at once. And I did it one way here that was in cell C6. I did it the way that the book does it on its page, or it's slide 6. So it's figuring out the change of Q, dividing by the change of price, and then multiplying it by the average P divided by the average Q. So you can do it that way, and I showed that way of doing it in cell C6, and I kind of I showed it clearly down here in E8. Showed kind of typed out what I actually wrote there. But it's the same formula. When you can see it's the exact same formula. So it's doing the change of Q divided by the change of P times the average P divided by the average Q. So you can do it like that if you want. Another way that I mentioned here in cell C6 is, again, to do the change of Q over the average Q, then divide all of that by the change of price over the average price. So I'm going to just do this myself. Equals the change of Q, so 115 minus that. Oh, I need another parentheses out front though. Then, so I did my change of Q divided by the average Q. Luckily, Excel has this fancy average function. I got to close that whole thing off. So this is just the percent change of Q that I have. Now I've got to divide that by what's going to be my percent change of price. And again, I need to do two parentheses here, because in the inner one, it's just going to be finding the change of price. Then I close that one off, then divide it by the average of the prices. A second parentheses. So from in the little C section, C3, C2, this is the finding the percent change of price. And over here is finding the percent change of Q. So I hit enter for that. I wait 10 minutes for my screen to show up. It shows -1, but it's in currency still. Let me change it to a regular number. So same value that I had for all of the others. If you look just at the sheet, as I downloaded the sheet, I had cell B11 that was filled in, and I didn't really label it at all. But if I kind of look at it, it's giving me the percent change of price for this second example here, this example B, doing $107 minus 165 divided by the average of those two. So this negative 43% here is actually the percent change of P. And if I wanted to do the quantities too, I could cheat a little bit and just copy and paste the whole formula and just double check it. But 68,000 minus 35,000 divided by the average of those two. There's my percent change of Q. And again, I can do an E equals percent change of P divided by the percent change of P, or sorry, the percent change of Q divided by the percent change of P to give me that. Or I could do it the kind of longer way, but you only have to do it in one cell. 68,000 minus 35,000 divided by the average of those two. Divide that whole thing by the change of price divided by the average of the two prices. Like that. I want these as percentages or dollars. Just like having them like that. So I get negative 1.464 both ways. Actually pretty close elasticities to these. And I gave you a third set of data down here too. You could try typing all those into, but I bet if I just copy this whole thing and do it again, you guys do the same thing. So I just copied all my formulas and cheated a little bit, but it's still calculating everything the same way. Doing that way. So that's what sheet 1 is doing, and I looked through my playlist, and I didn't look like I had a video on calculating arc elasticities. So you might find that useful for making sense of sheet 1 and for making sense of the assignment too.